Hello. What's up, gang? It's me. I am back from the dead, back from Ohio, back on the podcast. I didn't plan to take any time off. I planned to not take any time off, and then we had an episode with my friend Ryan McKee that was about to go up, and I recorded it to a click track, or at least I exported it to a click track, so it was unusable, and then just sort of got overwhelmed with a ton of shit, and we decided to take the month of January off. But we're back. The episode with Ryan will be going up next week. I wanted to record sort of a new header for this, or an intro to sort of drag y'all back into this shit show we call a podcast. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been up to, the sort of my primary concerns of the last couple of months. If you're following along on social media and stuff like that, you know that I toured out to Ohio with my friend Rad Pinkard, who had never been on the road before. And that was awesome because I don't know, I'm so fucking jaded. I'm so over it, and that's wrong, and I know it's wrong. And sometimes what it takes to prove to myself that it's wrong is to bring somebody like Rad out on the road who's excited about fucking literally everything. And I don't know, it was really great to sort of re-experience the road for the first time. Through his eyes, with him seeing it, he was like am I going to have my own dressing room at these places? And I was like, bro, we're playing the dressing room. Like, most of these rooms don't have room. Like yeah, it was great. I was super worried about how Sadie was going to do. She was great. Then when I was in Ohio, I was sort of just like camping out in the house there for a month before I toured back with Jake. Jake is the opposite of Rad, of course. One of the things I love about Jake is that he's so unflappable. We've literally been on the road together for all of eternity, and I've put him in every shitty situation, and he's so reliable. He's so unflappable, unshakable. Doesn't matter if it's an empty room or a hostile room or hundreds of people. He just does his fucking job, and I love that. And it was awesome, sort of like having those alternating tours of the sort of, the seasoned pro who's seen everything, and then the young buck. But the middle part of that sandwich is I was in Ohio for a month, and I've sort of been hush-hush about this because I don't know how to feel about it, or I didn't know how to feel about it, and I didn't know how other people would react to it. I have been hunting for the last couple of months. My old friend Lou Poster, who I met 20 years ago this year, and Lou and I have been through a million different things. He's an incredible songwriter. I met him as like a punk rock songwriter in the band Grafton, and since then he's evolved to be incredible sort of country Americana songwriter. Leads the band Driftmouth, who I've toured with and will tour with again, and one of my favorites, one of my current favorites, absolutely. But Lou sort of took me under his wing these last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, and did everything that he could to teach me 40 years of hunting experience in a couple of months. And it was such a wild trip. It's kind of an ironic premise of the guy who loves animals and hates guns, learning how to hunt. But Lou taught me how to hunt whitetail deer in Ohio with a crossbow, which is incredibly fucking hard. And I was just, it sort of consumed my entire life for last couple of months, especially the month of December, where I was out there a couple times a day for 3 or 4 hours at a time, just freezing my ass off and wondering what the hell I was doing. I don't want to give anything away. There are like sort of more epiphanies than I can run through, but this is a really super heavy transformative experience for me. And I may actually try and pitch a piece on it, or maybe even a fucking book, because it was that layered and that deep. But one of the things that I learned along the way is, the spoiler alert, this is the thing that happens in every one of my stories, which is I learned that all of my preconceived notions are totally wrong, and that I didn't understand the thing that I thought I understood. And then I have to sort of relearn everything. So I sat down with Lou and we had a sort of a long, protracted conversation about where he comes from, his experience of hunting, and his relationship with hunting, with deer, with the land, and then how challenging and tricky and hopefully rewarding it was for him to teach somebody completely green how to hunt. So we try to be. Hunting's not for everybody. Eating meat isn't for everybody. I get that. We do our best to be respectful and tactful. But if you hate hunting and nothing is going to change your mind, then you can skip to next week's episode. But if you hate hunting, I would actually encourage you to listen to this one, because I think that through the course of the episode, you can hear me changing my mind about it and changing my relationship to hunting and my understanding of it. And I don't know, it was a really transformative experience for me. And I think at its core, this whole experience was about not just hunting, but the transformative power of friendship. So I'm incredibly grateful to my friend Lou for going down this fucking wild rabbit hole with me. And I'm happy to be back. I'm happy you're here. I hope you enjoy this episode. First one of 2023 with my old friend Lou Poster.
Mishka Shabali is catching up with friends who are arguably more talented than him.
Record, and if it runs out after 15 minutes, we'll just record this again for the third time.
All right, hang on just a second there, bud.
All right.
There you are. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lag. I don't know if it's like my internet or what.
I can definitely hear it. Let's see. I don't have any of my shit open. You are on your new Earthlink shit or whatever it is, Skynet.
Skynet, yeah. I'm on the Starlink. Yes, I'm on the good shit.
Let's try and turn off video and see if that helps.
All right, what do you think about that?
That seems to be better. Tell me what you had for breakfast this morning.
I didn't eat breakfast.
Okay.
Yet.
I think that's better. It might just be that we have to do it without video.
Okay, that's totally fine. I wanted you to at least see your deer head and the awesome plague shed that you were in. So
I remember that skull being a lot bigger.
It loses 10 pounds on camera.
Yeah, it's the slimming filter that you put on that mount.
Right.
How are you, buddy? What's new? I have so much weird shit to report from being on tour, and this isn't that podcast. This. It's so weird to come home and to have this sort of transformational experience and have everything be at once the same and also completely different.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've experienced that kind of attenuation that I'm sure just got shoved into the highest possible gear when you were on tour, because to to go from like I don't know, the calm, almost onanistic like existence that is hunting in a shed by yourself or in a blind or whatever, to all of a sudden being on tour like all across the country with people in your face all the time, and being on the road and constantly engaged with other people was probably very jarring. I imagine it was probably a tough experience.
It's like in that movie Silkwood, where she gets contaminated. I think it's Meryl Streep or Julia Roberts or whatever, and then they go and just like spray her with all this water from every direction. When you're on tour, it's just this constant bath of information at full force all the time. Right. And to go from the sensory deprivation of hunting to being on the road, man, it's fucking weird.
Yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this podcast is going to be about hunting. People know you a little bit from the podcast. They know that you and I go way back. You're a songwriter. You're a man of the woods. This time we're going to talk about hunting, and I guess let's start with your relationship with it. Like when did your hunting life start, and how did your hunting life start?
I was probably about 8 years old the first time I was allowed to go into the woods with a firearm in my hands. But my hunting life probably started before I even really had any consciousness. My dad grew up hunting and fishing and all that good shit, and it's just part of it. It's like air or whatever. But I remember distinctly the first time that I was allowed to hunt squirrels. I had an old 410 single action, single shot breech shotgun. And in order to get the hammer back on it, I mean, I was 8 and I was undersized at 8. Like I was a small 8-year-old. I was probably the size of a normal 5 or 6-year-old. And trying to work the hammer back took 2 hands and all the strength that I could muster to get off one shot at a squirrel. But yeah, I've been doing it since I was far too young to be doing
it. Did you have any sense of internal conflict when you started hunting? I mean, squirrels are cute as hell.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd already eaten several of them by the time that I was allowed to kill one myself. So I don't really have that cute relationship with food. I didn't have anything hit me until I killed my first deer. And then deer are just undeniably adorable and human sized. And there's a lot that's wrapped up in like killing your first deer. Knowing that you can take a life that's that big and that significant and that, meaningful, and that has that much food attached to it. It's that much meat. There are a lot of things. I think some of them are my culture, the culture that I've grown up in. There's some of them are modern culture, and some of them are just in the DNA that when you kill an animal that size for food, there's a feeling that goes along with that is a bittersweet kind of a thing that, I think we just have that as part of our hardware.
Yeah, it's, there's so much. There's this sort of weight of bad metaphors behind deer because, when you see a deer that's been hit by a car 3 times on the side of the road, it just looks like wet garbage, but when you see deer alive in the wild, all your head fills with all these things that you've heard or soaked up in movies or literature, how majestic they are. Majestic isn't a word that we seem to use for anything other than like fucking canyons and deer, and so it's totally cliche and overused, and also completely true and perfect and accurate.
Well, I think that the wet garbage aspect of that, the deer laying on the side of the road, that's the wet garbage is our culture. Like the wet garbage is us. That's what we did to that majestic thing. And when you get to that point with it, and you realize that the deer is just a mirror of like, are you engaging with it well, or are you engaging with it poorly? And then that becomes like the bigger picture. Like, are you engaging with the world well, or are you engaging with the world in a detrimental way?
to think about animals as, you said, oh, I've never found food to be cute. I think one of the things you're getting at there is the classicism or the class consciousness inherent in a layperson's judgment of hunters and hunting.
I think there's a lot wrapped up in that. Most people that do eat meat will kill an animal with $1 without thinking about it. Yeah. Going through a drive-through or, over a grocery store or whatever. That dollar that you spent went to killing the animal that you just purchased, regardless of whether or not you killed it with your bare hands. There are a lot of people on this planet and in this country and in this state that they don't have those dollars, that's not an option for, or if it is an option, it's a treat. Yeah. And there is a very cost-effective way to sustain yourself. And, whether that's a choice or a circumstance or whatever, some people just don't choose to engage and have money in their pocket. Some people can't get money in their pocket, but for whatever reason, you can go out and hunt your food and, in a very, very cost-effective way, provide for yourself.
I think it's a Bob Dylan line. The executioner's face is always well hidden. And when we're thinking about our food production or political violence, it's like people are okay with the death penalty, but not okay with throwing the switch themselves,
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Having
that distance, that it's not really going to disconnect. It's just it's having the buffer, and that's the condom that allows you to just fuck up whatever you want,
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think the classist thing too is that, when you have $1 to spend at fucking Arby's or Burger King, you're not just sort of paying to kill an animal, you're paying to have somebody else kill it in a way that's concealed from you. And you get this like pink hockey puck or a gray hockey puck in the case of fast food that is completely removed. It's like any trace of cruelty or killing or death or life itself is completely it's been completely hidden.
Right. And the cruelty is not just towards the animal, it's towards the people that have to stand on a production line all day and slaughter these animals and deal with their entrails and deal with the offal and all that stuff. Like, you're causing other people to suffer, like humans to suffer in addition to animals. And all that shit is true. And I still eat meat and I'll still go to fucking Arby's tomorrow. Like, it's just part of it. But that said, there is a better way and I'm aware of it. I don't get all of my meat from the deer that I harvest. I only harvest 2 or 3 deer a year, Mm-hmm. But I am well aware that the ethics of hunting are far superior to the ethics of drive-through fast food.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we talk about is, the cruelty-free meat. And not only is there no such thing as cruelty-free meat, there's no such thing as cruelty-free vegetables unless you like grew them yourself and, from absolutely from the ground up. And there's no cruelty-free iPhone or computer or, your car, anything like that.
Right. You're right. I mean, somebody has to bring that to you. Anything that you don't do yourself pretty much is causing somebody else to do it for you. So, we're, and everything is like that. It's every little tendril of your daily existence has some foot in that cruelty or that, that cycle.
A big part of this process of learning how to hunt, and of course, like even before I learned how to hunt, of just doing the mental gymnastics of overthinking every single aspect of it, was trying to reckon with my own cruelty. Like, do I have the capacity to do this? Do I have the emotional fortitude to take the life of another being roughly the same size and shape that I am?
Yeah, and you don't know if you can until you're on the other side of it. And that's like when we started doing this, like before we even got into the woods for the first time, I remember I looked at you and I was like, you're going to cry. And like, we need to be ready for that. You know what I mean? Like, we might be in the blind together, when this happens, and you're going to cry, and I need you to be okay with that. You know what I mean? Because you don't know it until you've done it. You don't know if you have the capacity to do it until it's too late. And I think that everybody that does hunt and that takes that first experience in, processes it, and then decides to hunt again. There's a I don't know, a decision, I guess, that gets made that you can deal with that amount of grief, in order to do this thing that you love to do, and that you can take that pixel-sized bite of grief out of the bigger picture of grief that is millions of cows being led to slaughter, blah blah blah, that whole thing that we talked about earlier. You can take that, because that's what one person can hold. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So how old were you the first time you shot a deer? And tell me that story.
I was 12 or 13 years old. I had a 243. We were on shut down coal mines, topside property. My dad used to work for the mines for Consol in north central West Virginia. And even though he was working a different mine at the time, and he had worked at this particular mine previously and was on good terms with everybody there, security guards included. And so we would go and hunt those properties. And I shot a doe with my 243. I was very excited. I pulled my shot just slightly. She was slightly gut shot, but you can hunt with a high powered rifle there, a bottleneck cartridge. So that bullet did its job. The deer did not suffer. We went and got it and dragged it, gutted it and all that. And it was highly emotional. It was the first time that I had killed a deer. You kind of watch the light go out of their eyes. They kind of glaze over. And it's a lot to take in as a kid. Even though I had a lot of experience shooting, squirrels and pheasant, grouse, and all the stuff that used to run around these hills and hollers. It was the first time that I had taken a deer, and it was gut shot, which meant that it was messy. It wasn't terribly gut shot, but there was like some bad stuff in the body cavity when we went to field dress it. And it was almost like that was almost some kind of karmic punishment for making a poor shot and, a less ethical shot. You have to deal with this shit. Literally. Like, yeah. Like, here you go. You fucked up. Here's how you have to deal with it. And I learned that lesson real well. And I take in very thoroughly whether or not I can make an ethical kill shot when I'm in a situation to make a shot. I haven't wounded a deer in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because thinking about hunting and thinking about people's relationship with animals, inevitably you sort of like run up against the burden of white folks' Native American lore and their fetishization of Native Americans and indigenous cultures. And, we see the relationship that indigenous people have with deer or moose or walrus, the different, whatever animal, sustains that tribe. But I think one of the things that you're getting at is poor working folks in West Virginia have an intimate relationship with deer in order to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of what, the white person's notion of the relationship that the native tribes of this country have with the deer is romanticized. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh, well, you're going to sit in a blind and shoot a deer that's, where it goes and you see its path and there's food here or whatever. And I know that they come from a place where they think that possibly the native tribes just wandered out into the woods and shot whatever random things that they could see and didn't have any technique or skill or, effort into the hunting process. And it's telling, I think, to see that kind of attitude they look at the way that in their minds, the way that the Native Americans would have hunted deer as some lofty thing, and the way that the poor people in Appalachia and pretty much all over this country, it doesn't have to be in this region, but the people who are dealing with poverty and who are getting their food this way, they look down on that. And so they look up to, this romanticized notion that does not exist, and look down on this other notion that absolutely does exist and that is necessary and in our time. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. That's another one of the great disconnects that I just cannot wrap my head around.
I think there is this fantasy of, sort of a pure form of hunting that we get from like Hollywood or whatever. But the truth is that, the Inuit have been hunting with skidoos for generations, and Native Americans have been hunting with high-powered rifles and shotguns and fucking 12 packs of beer for generations, and that this is how people live now,
Yeah. Well, and there's obviously there's still a right way and a wrong way to do this. Like, in the interim between your first trip out here and your second, we had a truck drive down my road and shoot a deer out the window and go collect it with a high-powered rifle off the road, completely illegal poaching. And the neighborhood kind of came together and figured out who this person was and got the, proper authorities involved. That's wrong. You know what I mean? That's absolutely fucking wrong. That's not ethical. That's not helping somebody. That's not anything other than some dude trophy hunting from his pickup truck driving down the road.
Yeah.
If you're just looking for me, there are does everywhere. You can get permission to go on somebody's property or go find some public land and take a deer. It's not that hard. But, I guess when we're talking about the ethics of this, and I know that that's a big concern, especially like on your end of it, coming in cold and not having hunted before, the ethical take on this is that there's no purity in it. There's no purity in the world. So you just take the best case scenario that you can build for yourself and try to live that. I love hunt. I just love to sit in a deer blind. Even if I don't take an animal, I'll sit up there for a month and watch the deer run around and watch the squirrels and watch the birds. Like being a part of the thing is to me the whole point of it. Like being an apex predator in my own environment and being able to reach out and just touch the thing that sustains me and that gave me life in the first place. Like that is the point. All the other stuff, I try to harvest my animals in an ethical way. I like to make a clean shot. I like to, stay on my own property and not trespass. I like to hunt deer in season so that the, DNR knows when the deer are harvested. I always tag my deer and report them. You know what I mean? Like there are ways to do this, and that doesn't just make me feel good. That's the way that I want to be. But I don't know. Ethically, I think that hunting is the superior way to
go. One of the things that, having puzzled over this over and over again in my head too, is that to say ethical, we're describing a ratio, that there is no ethical binary of that. It's ethical or unethical, and this is not the first time it's come up on the podcast, but the only ethical decision is suicide. If you want to go through this world without killing animals or bugs or hurting other people, fucking dip out now. We're dragged into this world against our will. And then in order to stay here, to continue to be here, we have to accept that this concept of ahimsa, of do no harm, is bullshit. There's no such thing as do no harm. It's do the least amount of harm that you can feasibly do, understanding that in order to continue to exist in this world, you will be doing harm not just to one person, but to many people and to many environments. And it's to do the least amount of harm that you can manage as long as it's convenient and doesn't fucking drive you insane, and at every point in our lives, we're making decisions that prioritize the health and the lives of our friends, our family, ourselves, over and above the lives of others. And that's fucking life, man.
It is. It is. And I think that maybe the decision is trying to do the harm that can be healed, right?
Right. Sustainability.
I harvest a couple of deer, and every year a few more deer are born. That's a harm that can be healed. If I kill all of the deer, that's not a harm that can be healed. If I herd all the deer into a pen and slaughter them and say that they're all mine, that's a harm that cannot be healed. And I think that that's the balance. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to do something. Yes, it's going to cause a harm to that individual animal, but it's going to promote the overall health of the herd. And it's that harm that I did by killing that one animal will be healed by the herd within a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I want to push deeper into this, because one of the things that, we're sort of contrasting the experience of somebody driving down a road with a high-powered rifle and taking a pot shot at a deer out of their fucking window and then just grabbing the deer and going, versus the our experience of hunting and what hunting means and how much work goes into it. And one of the things that immediately pops for me is that to drive down a rural road in your pickup with your rifle in hand, that you're invading, you're just imposing your will and your technology on the environment with no understanding of it. And talking to my mom about this, Mom, I'm glad you're not listening to this podcast. My mom was like, oh, Lou baits, for deer, just like Uncle Don does, that he feeds them and then just picks which one he wants. And that's that, and she sort of said it like it was cheating. And that's absolutely how I understood it initially. But now, having walked up and down that fucking hill with you a million times, dragging, bags of corn and minerals, we fed way more deer than we killed.
Lots more deer. And, it's not a guarantee. Like, it's not like you put out corn and then your target deer shows up. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how it works. And again, to go to that notion of like the noble savage, trope or whatever.
Right.
Native Americans baited deer too. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You don't throw a hook in the water without a worm on it. Like, that's just not how you get animals to eat. You have to up your odds. You have to make yourself a viable predator. So, you don't just wander into the woods and hope that something walks past you. It's not how it works. So, and it's never worked like that. At any point in human history, it's never worked like that. So let's just get that one out of the way. Yeah. So yes, we do use, I feed the deer year round, because I want them patterning in my hill, because I want them healthy, because in the spring I feed extra minerals so that the does can, be healthy to raise their fawns. All summer long I keep minerals and feed out. And, between myself and a few neighbors around here, over the 600 or 700 acres that we have collectively among us, we maintain a very healthy herd of deer. They're not penned in. They're not tame animals. They're wild animals, but it's our, I think, responsibility, because of the great gift that we get every year of venison from them, to maintain that herd. Not in a husbandry kind of a way. It's not like keeping cattle, but we still need to make sure that our herd is sustainable and sustained.
Just a little side note, one of the reasons that I quit drinking, that was a concept that came up again and again in my head, is just that this is not sustainable. This isn't something that I can maintain, that this will have to stop. One of the things that was really interesting for me, sort of coming into the whole hunting experience with you, was seeing all the different ways in which my preconceived notions of hunters and hunting were wrong. And one of the things that was fascinating to me was that, especially because people love shitting on Ohio, and if you're one of them and you're listening, man, fuck you. Ohio's the best. But to see what deer nerds you and your neighbors are, that you would have the trail cam set up and that you would be tracking these different bucks that, this one is desirable for this reason because it's typical, and this one's desirable because it's atypical, and this one's undesirable. And it's like thinking about you guys texting each other, like giggling with excitement, like fucking teenage girls talking about, ooh, cute guy alert, the way when you see a nice rack, seeing a fucking big buck on the camera. It's like I don't know, man. It was, oh God, I was like, it's really endearing. Fuck that pun. No, it was that's a terrible one. It's so cool. One of the things I wanted this podcast to be about was about enthusiasm, about people getting excited about shit, and to see how excited you and your neighbor Sam got about not just hunting deer, but seeing deer, deer sign, when somebody shot a deer, like the excitement with which you treat, tracking them and getting out there and for hours and hours.
It's exhilarating. I mean, there's, again, part of the hardware is finding a spot of blood on the ground. Like, that just hits something so deep inside of you when you're tracking a deer. Like, I lost complete track of time. We were out there that one day for 4 hours, 5 hours?
Yeah, forever.
And then the next day for 8 or 9. I mean, and I just completely lose track of that time. I don't find it tedious at all. I'm in the woods, which is my favorite place to be. And I'm doing something that, millions of years of evolution has led me to be able to do. And that there's just no part of my forebrain that's really active at that time. I'm looking at blood and I'm trying to determine the trajectory of the animal, the speed of the animal, and figure out where it might be from here. And that's such a great feeling. But to go back to the trail cams, we run those all year, and we see those bucks start to develop, in June, coming into velvet, and we start to say, oh, this is that deer from last year. He's doing this now. And this is that deer. Oh, he's a year older and he's got this, configuration, or he's gotten more mass, or, oh, he's actually kind of maybe starting to backslide a little bit. Maybe he's past his 5.5, 6.5 year prime. Maybe that deer needs to be harvested. And we start at that point identifying bucks and kind of making a list about, what ones need to come out. And again, that's herd maintenance. You want to make sure that the older bucks are getting weeded out of the way so that the younger bucks with the new genes can come in, right? Because an old buck will run off all of the young ones if he's allowed to just maintain that area. So that's just another part of what, that's all about. But we get so excited. Like, we'll see a 10 point. Oh my God. I'll call Sam immediately. Hey, Sam, I got this new 10 point on my camera. Driggs will come over here. Dave Driggs, I shit you not, ran over here the other day because he found the sheds off of his target buck that he did not get a shot at this year. He found that deer. It shed early, and he found them. And he came straight to me. He did not call. He did not text to say, hey, is this a good time? He drove straight up my driveway with 2 antlers in his hands. And he's like, I found Buster's sheds. That's how excited we get.
Give me the names of 6 deer that you've seen on camera this year.
Well, names, I don't know. We've got Calabas was the deer that that really hooked me on this property. That was a couple of years ago. It was a kind of a ruddy, brownish rack, and he was non-typical. He would have been a mainframe 8, and then he had like 11 on one side and 4 on the other. There was Mr. Handsome. There was Too Wide. There was Dwight. There was Sawtooth. There's Buster, obviously. This deer, there was Lloyd Christmas, which was your deer, and then once you bounced an arrow off of him, I started calling him Old Ironsides. But the deer get named, but not in a pet kind of a way, just in an ID kind of a way. Like, hey, that deer, I can spot that deer and I can pick that deer out now. And when we were tracking Ironsides, you had that encounter with Sawtooth.
Yeah. One of the things that has been so fascinating for me about this journey was seeing how much the this isn't the great white hunter imposing his will and technology upon the land as much as it was integration. That and to hunt in a blind when you're baiting deer, the you're not tricking the deer or trapping the deer. You're the trick that you're pulling is that you're disappearing, is that you have to become part of the environment, and not just the deer's environment, but the environment of all the animals in that ecosystem.
Exactly. And it's that attenuation that I think is so important. And I think it's something we talked about a lot when we were in the blind. Well, we whispered about sometimes when we were in the blind. But that calming and stilling and quieting yourself, there's got to be, I'm assuming that yoga and meditation and things like that deal with that kind of concept. But to do it in the woods, that stillness and that calm and that sense of quiet purpose is unfound anywhere else in the world for me. I just don't have it anyplace else. And to be able to, I don't know, assimilate myself into the environment and to be part of it. Again, I will sit up there with a crossbow in hand in the middle of 10 deer and just watch them for hours and hours at a time with no intention of harvesting one. I, get to the point where I'm in that herd. I watch them play. I watch them eat. We watch them bed down. You pick up on all their behaviors, the way that they communicate with each other. You pick up the way that the squirrels communicate with each other. You got to see that a couple of times, like when a hawk would show up and that alarm call would go off and you could hear it cascade from ridgetop to ridgetop. That kind of stuff is always there, whether you're there to see it or not. That stuff is happening every day. And that's our world. That's the world that we came from. We live in this moat of an existence between that world and whatever else is out there, but that natural world is constant. It's gravity. It doesn't go away. I feel like the world that we've made as a society, as a culture, is tenuous. It can crumble, but when it crumbles, it becomes that.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? The thing that I love the most can never go away. It is the world. And I think it's really important to have that as the basis and bedrock foundation of my life, my existence. Because it puts everything else into a perspective that I think has been very valuable.
What, like a staple shot of any good sort of futuristic sci-fi fantasy apocalyptic movie is, seeing at the end of Planet of the Apes, the Statue of Liberty, poking out of the beach, or seeing the Sears Tower or something, some famous landmark, submerged or covered with moss and vines, and it's always presented to us as something catastrophic, and I've always found it kind of comforting.
Oh my God, it's so terrible. Yeah, it's awesome. It's so great to me. Is that nature's gonna win.
Yeah, and the house is undefeated.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So we've talked about a ton of this shit, a million times in the blind or driving to and from, or our sort of like powwow sessions when I'm expressing frustration to you outside of your house, like, I can't fucking do it. But I don't know that I've ever asked you this question. Why did you want to teach me how to do this? What made you want to bring me into this experience? It's a lot of fucking work on your end.
It is. It's something that I thought that you were uniquely suited to grow into, and here's why. When we first met, back in the blackout days,
20 years ago this year.
That's correct. Yeah, 2003, right?
Yep.
When we met at that blackout, around that time, whatever, we hung out in Athens at the Blackout Fest. And after the after party that night, we all woke up the next morning. We went to shoot guns. And I know that you remember this because it was one of the freakiest fucking things that's ever happened in like
Yep.
my whole life. We went out to shoot guns with a bunch of dudes. Now, I grew up, again, with firearms. I'm very comfortable around firearms, but there are fucking rules. And when those rules don't get followed, I get a little nervous. And there were no rules at this place. Like, there were 10 people on this deck of this cabin shooting at water, which you're not allowed to do. There were people downrange messing with targets while other people were on the firing line shooting at a different target. Not allowed to do that. Multiple weapons from the same person. Again, like super red flag shit. And there were also some weapons there that I wasn't comfortable saving. So all that said, I was a little freaked out. And you were with me and my now ex-wife, and, you know, we all shot a little bit. And then I was like, you know what? I think I've had enough. Like, I don't want to see anybody get hurt, so I'm going to leave. And you're like, yeah, let's go. And I didn't know about the school shooting. I didn't know about your history with firearms at that point. And after having had that experience with you and then finding that out about you, that told me a lot about your I guess curiosity might be the right word, but like your need to know things. You wanted to get familiar with that thing. And even though that was not a good scenario in which to get familiar with firearms, you did it and you were comfortable enough with it to do it and made yourself do it and got what you needed to get out of it. And knowing that, and again, not knowing how you would react once you had actually killed a deer, but knowing that about you and knowing the way that your mind works and just seeing the way that you like to deal with the world, I thought that you would really appreciate the attenuation that the woods gives you. And I know that the things that you've been through in the last couple of years, personally, that this would be a restorative and possibly healing, or at least jumpstarting a new wavelength in your thought patterns kind of an experience. And that was kind of something that I was hoping for, because we have talked at length about, you know, the darkness that has been in your life for the past several years. And I thought it was important for you to get a glimpse of what I think is something that just can never go away. And that's like a bedrock foundational thing for me.
If you look at it on paper that, I have a friend who has a history of sort of like gun trauma and violence, and who's going through an incredibly dark period in his life. What he needs is to kill something. That sounds like a fucking terrible idea. But you know, as you said, you know, talking about deer stories and stuff, the most boring part of the story is I shot the deer. I got the deer. You know,
you walked in and I shot it. It's the most boring part of the story.
Yeah, and it's every other part of the story that's that makes up the narrative. You know,
and there's so much. I mean, either side of that shot, the backstory behind it, how you got there, why you were sitting there at that moment, everything about it is part of the story and would affect whether or not that shot happened. And then, especially with a bow, not so much with a rifle, but especially when you're bow hunting, there's a whole other story that is involved in after the shot. And sometimes that's going for days.
So let's dive into this. Let's talk about my 3 arrows, I guess.
All right. So let's tell the story then.
Yeah. So we tried to trace this. Was it October when I first got out there, the first time I got an arrow on a deer?
So season started the 24th. We had some people out here that first week, and I think you came out the second week of season. So it would have been early October.
Yeah. And there was a deer that you had found on your trail cams that you had picked out for me.
Well, we had started talking about getting you out here a year before.
Yeah.
And because you'd had some venison here at the house, and you were like, you know what, I think I could do it. Okay, cool. So I started trying to pre-select the deer for you. I had a deer that has been part of our herd for a few years, and he's developed to the point where he's not going to develop any further, and he's a kind of an aggressive deer, and he's taken up a lot of real estate, and he would be a perfect deer for your first harvest. So I had a target deer picked out for you, and we went up on the hill, and we probably had 2 sits, I think, maybe before he came in.
Yeah. What's so fascinating to go back and put myself back in that scene of like sort of sitting in the blind for the first couple of times is is how much I didn't fucking know, and how much I didn't get it, even up to and after I pulled the trigger. That like how much I was missing, how much the story was hidden from view, or was right in front of me that I wasn't fucking seeing. Of how much of the of that experience is sitting and waiting, smelling a deer, hearing something that you think might be a deer that turns out to be a squirrel or a chipmunk or a stump. There's
sometimes the stumps get up and walk away.
Yeah. And I tell you what, Lou, for the amount of times that I sat up on the hill, I don't think I will ever have a hunting experience that will match the first time that we went up there in the morning, sitting there in this sort of like oily blackness where you really just can't see anything. And then having that experience of slowly it's sort of like what we conceptualize when we conceptualize the dawn of existence of like, sort of life happening in these puddles of muck, is that it's just this unguent blackness. And then there's a tree, there's another tree, there's branches, there's limbs okay, that's where the ground is. Okay. Now I can see the lightness of the feed. Now I see something moving, and watching it all, I literally take shape in front of you.
Yeah, and it being in that state of like so excited that you're on the edge of your seat and listening to every little twig snap and leaf rustle and not being able to see anything. And then the aperture starts to adjust and the light starts to come in and things start to reveal themselves. And it's being like so excited and so like right there and present. And then at the same time, absolutely silent and absolutely still. It's such a great state to be in. It's such an amazing place to be. And it's, I don't know if it's addictive, but it is definitely, my preferred place.
For me, it was just watching this hidden world come to life in front of me, because I've been like banging around in the woods my whole life. I was born in Canada. We had, a fucking black bear in our backyard one year. But the verb I use is banging around the woods, right. yelling and screaming and running through the woods, and, playing war and shit like that. Nothing like this scene that keeps replaying in my mind is you and I, walking up that hill behind your house, and me, sort of talking loudly and gesticulating wildly about, oh, what are we doing today, boss? What are we doing today? And then looking back and just seeing you like, just like your hands up at your eyes, like pushing down, like, okay, quiet now.
Yeah, that first couple of times,
shut up.
Tramping in the I was like, let's just keep the volume down a little bit. They're up there,
Yeah.
And I think I shared with you the idea that one of the best ways to sneak up on deer is to pretend that they too are armed and hunting you.
Just to give it a little edge of terror.
Right, exactly. But yeah, I mean, and watching you change that, you know what I mean, over the course of not just that one hunt, but the second hunt, and the amount of times that you made that walk. You got better and better every time. And it's, there's like a montage thing that's supposed to happen here from the time that you clunked into the woods the first time until the last time where you stalked in silently. You know what I mean? And just learning that, and again, the stalking in silently is, is the respectful communal part of this way of doing it. Whereas just, I don't know, running into the woods, talking and doing whatever is driving down the road with a rifle in your hand.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so
well, and then
even
there
though we've attenuated from that, we're here. And now that you know where we're at and we're on the trail, but when you attenuate down even further, now you're really part of it. You're quiet like a deer. You're thinking like a deer. You're acting like a predator in a natural environment. And that's what you have become.
Then there is this other thing of the crossbow, which is like a Rube Goldberg just destruction device. That it's so it's big and it's heavy like a rifle, but it's sort of unwieldy and temperamental and dangerous and also completely antiquated. That like you can't a bolt action rifle, you could still get a couple of shots off. And the crossbow, it's like fucking.
You get one shot.
A minute and a half to reload.
Yeah, you're going to get one shot with a crossbow.
Yeah,
and there's for you to jump into hunting during archery season. Archery season is longer, and so you get a more fulfilling experience when you hunt with a bow. And that's why I've been drawn to it. But it is not the 101 version of hunting. Going into the woods with a high-powered rifle and shooting a deer and making a poor shot that still is an ethical kill is a much easier thing. You can reach out a lot further. The deer doesn't have to come nearly as close to you. You don't have to be nearly as quiet. You don't have to, use as much scent cover. You don't have to do as much wind direction research and analysis. It's a lot easier to just go out and walk into the woods with a rifle, shoot a deer.
Yeah.
Not that it's easy in any way, but it is much easier than trying to shoot a projectile that's maximum range is 40 yards effectively.
Yeah.
And that's a long way. I don't like to shoot a crossbow any more than 20 to 25 yards. So you have to be up close with the deer. So you have to be better at being part of the environment and being hidden and being a predator. And so for you, when you jumped in, you're like, well, I want to bow hunt. I was like, well, that's a little advanced. Maybe we should start with squirrels or whatever. But, okay, cool. We'll just jump right into the highest level of whitetail hunting. And, I think that, so to try to tell the story a little bit about that first deer,
yeah.
We had, I just wanted to point out that, like, you knew that it wasn't supposed to be that easy, but I already done a lot of research and had that deer patterned in for you. And when you came in, it's one of the things that I do when I guide for other people is, I try to make sure that they're on the target deer that they want to take. And I'm pretty decent at being able to find a deer's patterns and hunt that deer specifically. So when you came in, after a couple of sits, we had that spike walk in, and when he did, I was like, he's going to go and hit these scrapes, and then he's going to come around on that feed. And then he did, and he kind of moved around from right to left in front of us, and we watched him. And then he moved off. And then your target buck walked in. And as soon as he did, you could feel the atmosphere change, right? Like we went from observing like a deer that we were not going to shoot, but that we just wanted to observe his behaviors and his patterns and watch to see that he was going to do what we expected. And then he did. And then boom, it's game on. Like that big deer came in and the adrenaline just spikes and, you're holding the bow up and he's facing you. So you don't have a shot.
I remember like your demeanor changing entirely. And I think you were looking through the binoculars and you were like, here he comes. And I was like, bullshit, I don't see anything. And then sure enough, there he came sort of like trickling out of the woods, up to the feed pile. But yeah, and then he was, if memory serves, he was quartered towards me for a long time.
And, everything does change because now you don't want to blow it. You don't want to accidentally, whisper too loud or move in the chair or fart. You know what I mean? Like you just want to hold it together for the next 5 minutes, because all of this preparation, all this work, all this time that we spent is coming down to this moment right here. Here's the minute. And that deer came in, and you had the crossbow up on him, and he's just facing towards you, and won't turn, give you a shot. And then he finally did turn. And you took your shot, and he went about 10 yards and stood for a second, and then went another 10 yards in a different direction and bedded down. And I was sure you had made a good hit on that deer. And so we just backed out. We waited about 20, 30 minutes. The sun went down.
Let me stop you here too, because you and I have been through a ton of shit together, with touring and being on the road, and just this, sort of ups and downs and stuff. And the two things that I remember from taking that first shot was I remember we had 3 minutes left of shooting light. It
was very good down to the wire, yes. And
I remember the smell of the string, which is, I'd fired the crossbow, 15 times before that and never smelled the string. But that day I could smell the friction of the string. And I remember looking over at you, and you did this silent scream thing. And I could see you shaking and watch a shiver of adrenaline go through your entire body. And I've never seen that happen ever before in any of the shit we've been in.
It's so exciting. And I was so happy for you. You know what I mean? To have that all go down exactly to plan, and to happen like that for you, I thought at that moment that was the best possible outcome for you, because it was your first hunt, and it was at that moment very easy. It was kind of hassle free. We went up a couple of times. We talked in a cursory manner about what I think hunting is, and what being part of this whole thing is. And then after a couple of days, I think that was our third sit. We'd done an evening, a morning, and then that was the third sit was that evening.
Yep.
Then that deer walked in, and I was like, "This is perfect. This is a very, sample size, fun meal pack way of getting Mishka into hunting, and he will be into doing it again next year, and it's going to be great."
And looking back now, I realize so many ways in which I didn't fucking get it, and I looking at you and seeing how excited you were, and just not understanding it. It was too fucking easy. It was too easy in that moment. And
right.
And we thought it was done.
Yeah. I thought it was done. You thought it was done. We walked back down to the house.
Yeah.
We waited a couple of hours, and then we snuck back up there, and we heard a deer crash out of there. And I assumed that it was your deer, and that he just hadn't expired yet. So we turned around and walked back down to the house, and you ended up sleeping in the plague shed. And
I remember too being like, man, God fucking damn it, Lou doesn't know anything about hunting. We got to go in there and get this deer, and it's the two things, of part of my brain being like, Lou's done this for 40 years, literally. And the other part being like, man, I know what's up. He doesn't know what's up, just that excitement that you have of, to encounter something new in your 40s is fucking bizarre. It's sort of getting to the point of seen everything, and I hadn't seen that, and I couldn't fucking wait to do it. And we just had to wait and wait. And then we went up the next morning, and it still wasn't there.
I will say it's easier to back out on a deer that isn't yours. It's easier to make that call when it's not your deer. But it was the right call. And that was borne out by the next day's adventure, because when we went back up the next day, we found where that deer had bedded down, and we followed the trail, and it was a very weak trail, and eventually it completely dried up. We could see where it had clouded up, and we tracked that deer for I think we tracked it for 5 hours or 6 hours that day, and then for 7 or 8 hours the next day, or maybe it was 7 or 8 hours the first day and 5 or 6 hours the day after. But we were all over through thickets. We were in, neighbors' properties. There were a lot of phone calls. It was a huge adventure. Sam, my neighbor, and I walked all the way around another piece of property to try to push that deer back down towards you, thinking that it was in a thicket. It turned out to be a completely different deer that I harvested later. But it was a huge ordeal trying to track that deer. And then 2 days later, who shows back up on my trail cam but your deer?
And I felt fucking awful that I'd blown it, that I'd killed this animal, that we weren't going to get to harvest it, and that I'd and I'll be honest about it too. We've been friends for a long time, been through a ton of shit, etc. But also to have this skill set of hunting passed down to you this late in life, it still makes a little boy out of you. And I was very aware at every turn that I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't want to disappoint Sam. I didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to fuck it up. I didn't want to and there is for women, I think there's so much sort of positive femininity that's handed down of this is the pie that your grandmother made, or this is how we've always done these, preserves, or I know I'm choosing traditionally capital F feminine things, but fucking sometimes that's how the world works. But there are these skills that are sort of handed down hand to hand. And from my dad, I got CCR and how to hate women, and that's it. And he never wanted to spend time with me when I was a kid. And then when we quickly moved away from Canada and sort of we were divorced from the hunting side of our family. And then right. I discovered punk rock and Boone's Farm, and and my life went a different way. But so while we were tracking that deer that I'd shot, there was definitely a part of me that was fucking crumbling inside, that I fucking blew it, and then he popped back up on camera a couple days later, when I'd gotten back to Arizona. Yeah, it was you had already left, and yeah, he popped back up on camera. That feeling, I've had that feeling. The deer that I have that's mounted on my wall in my house that I harvested last year, I shot that deer. We tracked it for 700 yards. It rained on us and washed the blood trail away. I thought I'd lost that deer, and the feeling of losing an animal that you've shot is one of the it's one of the worst feelings that there is in hunting. And it goes from that elation of yes, I did it, to no, I didn't, and I did bad. You know what I mean? So you go from the highest possible high in hunting to the absolute lowest. And it was my fear that was going to put you then off of hunting because of that experience. And then, he popped back up on camera. We're all good. He doesn't even have a limp. My guess is that was just a grazing shot. The fletching came off the arrow, and that might have been from that shoot through window. Still not really sure what happened with all that. But the point being, he showed back up on camera, and he's fine. And I think that took some weight off of you to see those pictures and to know that deer was still there. That also started the longest part of this journey, which was then when I got back out there first week of December, I felt like I had a score to settle with this deer, and that and then it was just sit after sit after sit after sit in the cold, in the dark, getting bored. You'd already harvested your buck for the season. So, after a couple of sits, then it was just me up there watching the same doe and two fawns come into that flat there again and again and again at the same time, and never seeing a shootable buck.
Right. And your deer was smart enough to go nocturnal after getting shot. So he wasn't showing back up. So then we were able to move you to a different location up here on the top of the hill, and that spot is a very productive spot. And I think at that point you had decided that your first deer didn't have to be a buck, that you could, live with
what maybe made that determination was I guess it's two things. One was when we had pulled the cameras from the trail cameras from Rocking Chair, and there was this like monster 8 or 10 point buck, and you were like pointing at the computer and howling and slapping your desk. And you were like, that's a lifetime buck right there. And at that point, that was the moment where I said, it's okay for me to take a doe, because I don't want it. I want to do this. I want this to be a thing that I do. I don't want to shoot my lifetime buck now. I want to. This has been so maddening and so exhausting and so frustrating. And the people around us were like, man, fucking what's up with your friend? Like that I was just getting crazy about it. And I wanted to complete this level, but I didn't want to like beat the entire game. And and also and I think this was the healing part of learning how to hunt. And it's funny because the way that you poach a deer is, when you take a large flashlight with maybe, a 3 or 4 inch diameter, like bulb, and you tape over it and then put a tiny hole in it. So just a tiny little part of the beam comes out, and then you can see the deer without your flashlight drawing attention to you. And this is jacklighting, correct?
Yes.
And that what's weird is that describes perfectly what I had to do in my head with my mind in order to be able to get to a point where I was able to take a shot at a doe. Because you kept describing to me the shot that you want to take on a deer of just behind the shoulder, slightly less than, slightly below the midway point, like on the vertical axis. And you kept describing the sound to me that it would make, like punting a basketball. And I knew exactly what sound you were talking about, but I couldn't even voice the words, because the sound you were describing is the thump that it makes when I pat my dog on her chest. That like hollow sound, one of my favorite sounds in the world, like one of the few perfect sounds in existence. And the thought that a deer with a body that looked markedly similar to my dog's body would make that sound when I was taking its life, I couldn't connect those dots. So in order to and when I was looking at deer, and also, my mother was like preparing to go through this surgery and then recovering from this surgery, and I had all this shit playing out in my head. What's ironic about this whole process is I cried a million times in the process of hunting this deer. Never once when I actually got the fucking deer, but in order to be able to make that decision to take a doe, I had to block out so much of my mind and then just open one little part of it. The part that's like, keep your hands out of the fucking triangle of death and the crossbow, like all the things you do before you put your right elbow down, all those things that I do without thinking, oh, this deer weighs about the same as your ex-girlfriend, or that looks an awful lot like your dog, or, things like that. And I had to master my mind in order to put an arrow on a doe. And mastering my mind is the thing that I have tried and tried and tried and failed and failed and failed to do in the last 2 years.
And, there's not a better environment when you're just out there with your mind. Like when you're in a blind in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, miles from any other human being, and it's just you and your mind, there's no better time to try to wrestle with it a little bit.
Lou, I felt like I was going crazy. And what's weird is it was the opposite process that was happening. I wasn't losing my mind out there. I was finding my mind again.
Yeah. That's what it's for.
And then I shot that doe and it got away.
So you shot the doe, and it was a much better shot than the first one, as far as a lethal shot. It was a little far back, but not too bad. And we tracked that deer. We found a good blood trail and we tracked it. And we could still hear it as the sun was going down on us. I think the sun had actually gone down on us. But we could hear it about 40 yards away. And I knew from the shot, from the trail, from the sign that I was seeing that deer was going to die and that we would come back in the morning and pick it up. I've done that dozens of times. That's what you do when you hunt with a bow in the evenings. Generally speaking, you shoot the deer, you go home, you at least have a cup of coffee or a nap, or you just sleep all night. And then you get up in the morning and go harvest the deer. And, that way you don't bounce it and it won't run 500 or 600 yards onto somebody else's property. Then there's a whole mess of phone calls and all this stuff. So
I'll admit to have not been a huge fan of tracking like deer at night either. There was one point where you and Sam and I were tracking that deer, and I got a little bit far from you and a little bit far from him, and we'd heard coyotes, and I had the weakest flashlight out of the three of us. And I was like, and I pretended like I was doing shit. And what I was really doing was making sure that you guys weren't out hunting for my body. And as soon as I got home that night, I Googled best flashlight, and then I bought it. And then I Googled best headlight, and then I bought that too. And I fucking those two things ready with my shit to go for next year.
I'll never take a scrap out again.
I was just like, I'm still a city boy. I'm not getting fucking lost out here in the woods with coyotes.
That's funny. Well, I mean, and it doesn't really matter how familiar you are with a piece of woods at night with a headlamp on. It's very disorienting. I mean, you really have to know where you are. And, that particular place that we were tracking that day, I'd only been on that property maybe 10 times.
Well, it was so steep, and it was so thorny, and then the mist from our breath would come up into the light from the headlights, and it would just turn into it would just sort of fog, so you couldn't see anything. And I was whatever, fucking trying to play it cool and stuff. And I was like, man, this sucks. This is I've done way too many hallucinogens to be out in the fucking woods this late at night with coyote sounds and my breath fogging up so I can't see. Like, I know how this ends,
I covered a lot of ground, army crawling, looking for blood spots, 4 or 5 or 7 feet apart from each other. And, by the time that I stood up and looked around, I was like, wow, that's going to be fun trying to find the blood from here. Again, it's an attenuation. I've used that word 90 times in this podcast, but like this, zooming in, zooming out is a lot of what that experience involves. And when you're looking for a drop of blood that is maybe 4 millimeters across in a trail that is maybe 2 feet across, that's in a parcel of woods that's 100 acres, you have to like zoom in and zoom out a lot. And when I spent a lot of time zoomed in like that and then tried to zoom out and try to find my way home, it's disorienting. You have to kind of take a beat and remember your skill set and get yourself out of there. But so we decided to back out. We did. We went back.
And the trail was a lot easier to find the next morning.
Much easier to find. We had stuck a knife in a tree on our last spot. And we walked right to it, picked up the knife, and we knew where we thought the deer was because we could hear it the night before. So we walked 40 yards in that direction, and yep, there's a bunch of fur everywhere and a bunch of blood and no deer. And so we started scanning around, and I saw what I thought was your deer. I thought that I saw your deer down in this flat.
Yep.
And we had heard coyotes really hard that night before, very close. And sometimes coyotes will get to a deer that's left overnight, but they usually just eat, parts that you don't want. They eat
the ass out of it.
They eat the ass out of it first. And sometimes the guts. Sometimes they even do you a little favor. Armpits, eyes, things like that will be gone. What we found, I have never seen before, and I hope to never see again. Possibly the most terrifying thing that I've ever seen in the woods. There was about a third of the hide left, and then just a bloody skull and a bloody spine. End of list. It was just carnage. I can't imagine how many coyotes must have been after that deer all night long.
And it was metal as fuck. Also
Terrifying.
like the orbital bones had been chewed away. The tongue was gone. The eyes were gone. Every limb was just the skull. And it was like a fucking Predator.
It had been quartered, and those quarters were gone, taken away, and just there on the ground is just a spine and a skull with a little bit of blood left on it.
And half the ribs just chewed off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It was, I mean, it really looked like out of like an 80s horror movie, like that, that it had been stripped by piranhas or something like that. But it was more, I mean, they ate the fucking bones, there were, and that was I didn't feel the same way in that moment that I did when I lost Ironsides, because it was, again, been through a ton of shit. I've never seen your face look the way that it did when we came upon that deer. Like you and Sam both I was like, I know these guys are super seasoned, and I could tell by the looks on your faces you'd never seen anything like it. And it almost felt worth it to me to lose that deer, to see you guys just like take your hats off and scratch your heads of like, what the fuck is this?
Well, that one just ain't your fault. I mean, there's nothing you could do about that. And both Sam and I were just, what the fuck? I've literally been in the woods since I was a little child, and I have never seen anything like that. And Sam has been doing this every bit as long as I have, and he's never seen anything like it. That picture, I don't know if you know this or not, got passed around in Athens circles that somebody posted to Facebook, and it kind of went around. And I've had people show it to me at the bar, like, hey, man, look at this. And they're like, yeah, I was there. I'm the one that found it. Like, holy shit.
That's wild.
It's nuts. Yeah. And, again, I don't know what it is with this is your first hunting experience and why every permutation of the weirdest outlier shit has to happen to you on your first experience. But here you go, buddy. Your first killed deer was completely stripped by coyotes. So, we don't count that one.
And hopefully that's the last time I see that, man. I felt and again, it was one of those things where I had to do a lot of work in my mind to say like those coyotes were they had a good night. They were happy. None of that meat was wasted. Obviously, it went right back into the system. I made up my mind to absolutely nail the next shot to make sure that I shot the deer right and that it fell and died.
Yeah, just knuckle down, get your marksmanship on, make a good shot right in the right spot.
So then after that, you guys busted me down to the fucking kiddie pool, to the bunny slope.
We have a stand that, is frequented by does. And I know that, I knew that you were running out of time, and that, the experience of having your deer taken by coyotes might be a soul breaker. You know what I mean? It might just be a spirit breaking event. And I wanted to make sure that you were, if you're going to take, harvest venison, that you got a good clear shot at a nice easy sit. You'd earned it. You'd been out slumming it in my stands and hiking up some harsh conditions and out in some rough stuff. And I thought we'd give you the easiest possible out here. So we put you on one of Sam's properties. Down by
Lou, I was so grateful that Sam was offering that opportunity. And also I was like, God damn it, I don't want to, I don't want like dunking on the low hoop. There's nothing that feels good about it. It's like I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do this, but also right. I was ready for the fucking journey to be over. I'd just been out there like so much, so often for so long. And then I don't think we can overstate how many times you hunted. I don't think that we can. I didn't do it. It was like every day for 3 weeks.
It was
every
morning and every evening. It wasn't just like a little bit here or like one day here. I mean, you hunted, 40 out of 42 possible sits there. Okay. You hunted a lot.
It was a lot.
And that's a lot. I mean, 40 sits, most hunters that are 40 years old haven't hunted 40 sits. Okay.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot. You got a lot of experience in a very compressed amount of time. And you'd earned a little respite from, just dogging it all that time. And the week before too. So,
Well, and then the first time that I went out there to sit at, I think I went out there 2 or 2:30, and Sam had said, "Oh, the does start to roll in around 3:30 or 4." I watched 4 or 5 deer on that field, and none of them got within shooting distance before the sun went down.
Of course, and that's the other thing. Like, even in the best possible scenario, nothing is fucking guaranteed here. This is not like, it's not like hunting in a penned-in area where the deer like do something the same time every day and they've been grown and raised. And, there are places where you can go and pay thousands of dollars to hunt mega giant deer that have been pen raised and are kept in a 12-foot fence in area, which is another form of bullshit that we'll talk about some other time. But, this is still, you're still hunting deer. We're just trying to put you in like the highest possible percentage situation. And so, yeah, you sat that first night out there, and even in that great situation, nothing is guaranteed, and you didn't get a shot at a deer. But then you got to go back the next morning.
And I wasn't even sure about going out that morning because Sam had talked about seeing them there at dusk, so I didn't know that there if there was going to be anything there in that morning. But I was like I gotta try. So my alarm went off, and I put on my fucking 4 pairs of pants and 3 sweaters and 2 coats, and and I knew that I was going to go out there and freeze again, but I just had, at this point I was just like, I gotta keep doing. And it was one of the things that I feel like I've focused on a lot in my life in the past couple of years is those small victories of like not going out and running 50 miles, but just running 3 miles every day for a month or whatever, but what I was going for here was like a big victory. And I'd made up my mind to take the second place thing of like getting a doe, which is fine. I wouldn't be able to have bragging rights or whatever. But then I'm sitting there, I'm freezing. I finally got into using the binoculars, having watched you use them religiously, like every time that we sat. And I was watching to my far left, because that's where the deer seemed to come in, and there was no action there. And then I looked directly out in front of me, and I saw what I thought was a fawn at the far edge of the field. And I was like, well, that's not the deer, but it's a deer, and that's a good sign. And then it slowly started to pick its way across the field towards me. And I was like, oh, that's a like 2.5-year-old doe. That's a shootable deer. I wouldn't be embarrassed to bring that home. And then I saw that it had antlers. And then I just about shit my pants. and you have to
hold up and
what's that?
Just tell me what that felt like. Like when you realized that there was a lone buck making its way across that giant field, possibly towards your.
I mean, mostly what I felt was dread. I was just like, I'm gonna fucking blow this again. And as embarrassing as it's been to shoot Ironsides and then lose him and then shoot this doe and then lose that, if I blow this, and that deer moved towards me, but moved very slowly, and he kept putting up his head and sniffing the air. And every time he put his head up, I was like, okay, his nostrils are going to pinch in when he sniffs hard. He's going to catch, he's going to smell me, and he's going to be gone. And that was the first shootable buck that I had seen in the whole month of December. I think I saw one other buck on the side of the road when I was driving home in a fury one night, but they had all become nocturnal by that point. And so it was one of those things where I sort of like told don't dare to hope. And then he kept getting closer and closer, and he was sort of quartered away in every possible way. Every possible way he could give me no shot, he did. And I was trying to remember all the things that you told me of the, when you sight in on the deer, 5 count before you squeeze the trigger, don't pull it, hold the shot steady, and then slowly squeeze the trigger so that you're sort of a little surprised when it goes off. Right. Keep your right arm down. All these mistakes that I'd made, other times, other shots that I was like determined not to make. And then the deer finally, he got real close to the pile of grain that we had in front of us. And I think it was like the last bag of corn that they had at Walmart too, or something. That, like, all these things just lining up to make it the most pressure-filled environment possible. And then he turned broadside and had his right foreleg blocking the shot. And I was like, God damn it. And then he moved. He took that one step, and I was like, there, that's the shot. Now I can shoot him right in the heart. And I took the safety, or no, I'd taken the safety off before, and he heard that, looked in my eyes, but then didn't run. And then I raised the crossbow, and the scope had fogged up with my breath. So I had to wait for the fog to clear, and then I lined up the shot, and then I squeezed the trigger. And I know now from having studied under you with this, that when you put the shot in the right place, that the deer plants its front 2 hooves and does like a mule kick. And when it's a mortal wound, the tail is down instead of the tail being up. And this deer didn't do the fucking mule kick. And I was like, God damn it. I blew this too. It didn't do the mule kick. It just tried to run away, but its tail was down, and it was like it couldn't get its front legs to work. It was sort of pushing with its hind legs, but struggling, having a hard time. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I got it. And then I watched it run 25 yards, maybe 40 yards, and then it fell. And I was, my heart was in my throat, and where it feels like your chest is twitching, that your heart's like trying to fucking jump out of your chest. And I was like, I know that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think that was it. I think that was it, and I immediately looked down at my phone to see what time it was. And it was just first light. And I was like, okay, 30 minutes from now, I have to lose that. I wait half an hour. And I'm like waiting and watch. And I immediately put the binoculars up to watch where the deer had fallen. And then minutes later, I watched a big cloud of steam go up. And I was like, that he just died right there. I just watched all the air leave its lungs. And I waited Lou, I'm sorry, I waited 12 minutes. I tried so fucking hard to wait for it. I tried so hard, I just couldn't do it. It was like a little kid waiting for Christmas. And then, but I was like, no, I watched that deer die. And then I came out the far side of the blind, and I'm like sort of creeping through the rows of the corn, like looking for the arrow. And it had been so hard to find the arrows. And I couldn't, and I knew where I'd shot and where the arrow should be. And then I saw the blood trail, and it was massive. It was a spray. And I was like, I got this deer. And then I tried to slowly pick my way towards where it was, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see a fucking thing. And I was like, this motherfucker got up and crawled away or something, guy, and I saw it. I saw the antler sticking up, and I walked over, and it was, man, I'm so excited, worked up, like just talking about it now. And it was dead, and I knew that I'd gotten it and I'd done it. And I walked back to the car. I've done a ton of speed in my life. I've done so much speed. I've never done as much speed as I did in that moment of just like feeling my entire body like just shiver with pleasure. Like, oh my God, I did it. Went back to the car. I got the sled, came out and put the deer in the sled, and it was heavy. It was so heavy. And then, humped it back, pulled it back there, got it in the back of my little 2005 Honda Element. And I was like, I'm gonna. I know Lou and Donna have fucking had it with me by this point. And I'm gonna go and drop this deer on fucking Lou's porch and go and wake him up. And as I was driving to your place, I saw Sam's GMC, and he stopped and rolled down his window, and I was like, Sam, I got it. And he was like, oh, you're going to be hunting there again, this evening? And I was like, no, I got it. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I got a fucking buck. And he was like, no. And I was like, no, I did. And he was like, bullshit. And I was like, Sam, it's in the back. And he was like, bullshit. And he turned his truck off, and I hopped out of the car and like went around to the back, and I opened the tailgate, and Sam's pretty low key guy, like in the pocket, doesn't get real loud, doesn't get real expressive. And when I opened the tailgate and he looked and he saw I got a buck, he just went like, holy shit. And like came and gave me a big hug, and then said, holy shit again, and gave me another hug. And then I was like, fucking follow me. Like, we're going to go to Lou's place. And I remember like pulling up and trying to get my fucking little element to go up your super steep driveway. And I was like, well, if I go into the pond now, like this whole thing, right. The whole venture is shot. And yeah. And I heard Stax start to bark, and I was like, I don't even need to call Lou or pound on the door. He's going to wake up. And then I might feel my phone ringing. And you definitely sounded over it.
Well, Donna woke me up and she was like, the hunting brigade is here. And because you had rolled up the driveway. And I was like, okay, let's see what's going on. Like, maybe Mishka hurt himself. I don't know what happened. It's
I think what you said was, you better have a deer.
Yeah, that's because the alternative to you waking me up at 8 o'clock in the morning was going to be something bad. So, yeah, you better have a deer. And you're like, yeah, I got it down. And I was like, cool, I'll be right down. And so I walked down, and I mean, whether you know this or not, like, I lived every one of those sits with you. Like, you were like, I'm like, all right. And I would just think about, like, man, I wonder if Mishka's seen any deer. Like, the reason that Sam was so happy for you is because when you've got a buddy that's out hunting and doing it hard like you were on this last hunt, you're really rooting for him. You know what I mean? It's like there's a little bit of vicarious living, and there's a whole lot of like just rooting for your team. Like, yeah. Man, go get it. And it's not a whole lot different than like the game-winning field goal. Like, you got to hug the kicker, man. Like, good job, buddy. And so when I walked down, and I was like, I was going to play it off nice and cool. You got your dough. I'm glad that you finally got this over with. I was going to say something mean, whatever. And then you open up this fucking truck, and it's this fucking 8-point buck. Yeah. And I was like, hell yeah, dude. Like, all of the emotion that I had that first day that you shot Ironsides was right back. It's that same adrenaline, that same like, hell yeah,
Yeah.
And it's thank you for at least giving me that small amount of surprise. I did that once for my dad. I shot a buck that's mounted down here in the cabin. That's a really beautiful, weird 12-point that has really tall brow tines. And I had shot it, and he was walking up towards me. He's like, what'd you get? It's like, oh, it's a little spike. And then by the time he got up to it, he could see how cool and how large the rack was on this deer. And he was, oh, my God. And just that, going through that little emotional thing is always a nice little kick. And I was really happy that you were able to do that for me. And it really is. It's a nice little jolt. And then we take the deer down out of the truck, and I realized that I'm not field dressed it. Because you didn't know how to field dress a deer, which makes sense. But, like, I thought you would call me to where the deer had fallen. We would field dress it together there. However, so there's a deer full of guts now in my driveway. And we ended up having to drag it over to the field across the street here and field dress it across the street. And so, we our ritual, we get cutting into the deer, and I start looking for the shot, and I asked you to tell me a story, and you're telling me a story, and I'm like, and where did you shoot it? And I'm looking, and I cannot find, there's blood everywhere, but I cannot find the entry and exit wound on the deer. And you're like, I was aiming right for the shoulder right there. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, there's no shoulder shot here.
And I was sure I shot him through the heart.
Yeah, I mean, because you said blood spray and all this.
Yeah,
and it went down
as fast as it died. Yeah,
right. Didn't have to track it hardly at all, and it's just it went 30, 40 yards, whatever, it fell, and all that stuff sounds like a heart shot to me too. But there is no hole in the chest cavity, and poking around, looking around, and I find it shot right through the middle of the neck. The middle of the neck, you got the carotid and the jugular was gone, and so that deer didn't live for 20 seconds after you shot it.
Yeah,
very ethical shot. Not where you were aiming for, is my guess.
Yeah, that was it's wild because talking to other people about this process of going through this with you, I knew that it was so much of this it's about doing the right thing, and it's about doing the right thing in the right way, and it's about doing the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. And it was super important to me to not to shoot a deer 2 minutes too early or 2 minutes too late, not to take a shot that I wasn't 100% confident of. I tried so hard to overcome my nerves and my excitement and just be patient and place it in the right spot. And I blew it each time, but I was determined each time to get it right. And I'm not going to lie, dude, it was kind of fucking crushing to find out that I had aimed at the biggest part of the deer and hadn't hit any of it. And it's like shooting at the billboard and putting out the fucking light on it, right. And, but having had time to live with it, I feel good about it because, and you made a point of this, too, that, I got the deer, right? I did get the deer. That deer didn't suffer. It was a good buck. The probably the most meaningful thing that you've said to me in 20 years of friendship is when we were dressing that deer, and 3 different times you looked at me and you said, "There's nothing wrong with this deer." And that I'll tell you, man, that landed for me. I felt like I had done the job, that I was a good boy, it's funny, this is how much emotional content there is with, with something like this. But I'm glad too that I kind of fucked it up at the end because, you and I have been threatening to record a song together at your place there. I don't know, every time I'm out there, and we never do. We're like, all right, this time we're going to go out in the back, that natural amphitheater. We're going to do something there. I got the recording software hooked up. I got this new guitar. We never get around to it. And I'm at peace with that because it means I got to keep coming back because I left something undone. And in this process of hunting for this deer and getting this deer, shooting it in a way that I killed it and killed it ethically, I'm proud of that. And also, I got to try this again, man, because I did not get it right.
Well, I think, a little bit of marksmanship training, you run a quarter mile and then pick up the crossbow and try to shoot straight. Do some things, get your heart rate up and get into that situation, and then kind of train yourself how to shoot in adverse circumstances. You're going to be great, man. The hardest part of this is not the shot. The boring part is the deer walked in and I shot it. The hard part is putting yourself in that situation time and again in a way that increases your odds of success, and to make sure that you're paying attention to all the things all the time. Being part of it isn't just observing it. It's literally living in it. And you really did learn how to do that. And the shooting stuff, that'll come. That's practice. But the mental attenuation is so important, and you did it. And I'm super proud of it.
Thanks, man. It's it really put new life into me. And that's one of the things that's been so weird is, having that experience and then like going back on tour, which is something that I know so well, and then coming back to my home here, is that I both feel restored to who I was, 3 years ago, and also transformed in that I feel so much more settled now. Like things haven't really rattled me the way that they used to. And right. I think so much of it is from, we talk about like narrowing the aperture, when you're sitting in the deer blind, and that you have to focus on this one thing to the exclusion of everything else. And there's a million different thoughts available to you. And some of those are useful for what you're trying to do, and some of them aren't. And you just need to turn those parts of your mind off, and then and use the thoughts that are useful to you and move forward with those. And that's what I've taken away from this. It's not that, I did feel sadness when we were dressing the deer, because it's amazing. I've never been that up close like that to a deer like that ever in my life. And it was big and it was heavy, and, it was like moving a body. And then, the fur was really soft, and it made me real sad. But mostly what I felt was gratitude, gratitude, obviously to the deer for just walking straight out of the woods and slowly picking its way across the field, and then putting itself right there for me when I needed it. Gratitude to you, obviously, for your friendship. And I know that I've been pretty high maintenance the last couple of years, and that there's been a lot of like heavy lifting, being friends with me, and you've never shied away from that. I'm really grateful to you for that. And also I mean, it's pride, but I feel gratitude towards myself that I somehow found the strength or the resilience to fuck it up and fuck it up and fuck it up and fuck it up, and just keep going back, and to just keep trying again, and to make this mistake one day, and then make a different mistake the next day, and then a different mistake the next day, and keep making all these mistakes, and then finally, eventually narrow the aperture enough that even though I didn't get it perfect, I got it close enough to bring home that deer,
Yeah. You were able to tune out what needed to be tuned out, tune in what needed to be tuned in, and harvest the deer. And, that a deer walked in and you shot it.
That's the tweet, right?
That's the tweet.
Lou, thank you so much for taking this fucking journey with me, for having me out there, for all the, all the time that we spent out there, all the, trying to pump 40 years worth of hunting knowledge into my rabbit brain in such a, quick span of time. And, man, I'm so glad that I didn't get the deer of a lifetime.
It was very, very rewarding for me to watch you go through that process, and I'm glad that we got to do that together.
Awesome. Good to talk to you, brother. I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Love you, Mishka.
Love you too, brother.
Bye.
Folks, thank you so much for listening. I know there's a million podcasts out there. We appreciate you spending your time with us. If you're digging the show, if you're enjoying it, if these conversations move you, make you laugh, annoy you, piss you off, please take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. It helps us grow the show, and it helps other people find it. If you'd like to hear bonus episodes, song demos, just sort of ranting off the cuff conversations, all sorts of different bonus material, writing advice, personal blog posts and stuff like that, go to patreon.com/Mishka Shabali. We will be having monthly episodes up there with my mom and I answering questions from readers, and there's all kinds of good stuff there. Thank you so much for supporting.